warm welcome our patron and chief guest for the International Human Resource Conference, His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan, UAE Cabinet Member and Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence. I would like to welcome all of you to the International Human Resource Conference.
Expressing gratitude to Blue Ocean for organizing and presenting this timely conference.
We shall now go to our next keynote speaker for today. We shall now explore on the subject of the utmost importance, and that is the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in HR strategy. And to discuss more on this matter, let us invite onto the stage Miss Marie Louise, Senior Director of Middle East, Africa, and South Asia at PepsiCo. Please, a big round of applause for Miss Marie.
All right. So I am super energized now, and I really think I need to change bank after that lovely speech that we just heard. So thank you for inviting me. I will share with you some views on the role of DE&I, or DI&E, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I put HR in brackets here because it's not really about HR as we know. That's one fundamental building block that we start with. It's really about us building our business and not necessarily building our HR. So that's why this really matters. This is a picture of this room sometime in the future. Now, obviously, as we heard before, it's not really this room. It is the metaverse, where we're all dialing in from, and we're sitting comfortably somewhere else. But let's pay attention to the picture here. It is extremely diverse, as you can see. We have collected a lot of differences in this picture. It's much more different than it is today in this room. And it's not only different, but what I'll tell you, it's also that it's very inclusive. Everybody that are attending this meeting in the metaverse a few years from now are able to participate in the workplace the way they are. So in this picture, we have people between the age of 22 to 67. We have people who are fully utilizing the gig economy. They are hired by several different organizations based on the skills that they have and they can provide. So they're experts, and they take contracts here and there. Many of these people are also working or living remotely in rural areas. They did not have job opportunities to date, but thanks to technology and metaverse, they are now contributing based on the place that they live, because they cannot move to any urban areas. We also have people who are very comfortable in their skin. They can show their tattoos, and people talk about them when they have lunch together. They don't need to hide their tattoos. We have several people here who are part-time working fathers, because they choose to stay home with their kids to let their wives contribute to work. So it's a very diverse, very inclusive picture. Let me talk to you a little bit about how can we get there. Now, I want to take a three-lens approach on this challenge that we have. First of all is society. So that's the macro view. What is really happening around us? What's happening in society that makes DE&I be an important aspect? What is happening in organization? Where is really where we maybe spend most of our time and where we can have a huge impact as people practitioners. And the last lens is really the micro lens. So that's about you, me. What is it that we can do to make sure that in the future we really look that diverse and we are that inclusive as we just saw on that picture? We'll start with society. So if we look at the macro environment, what are things that are really going on that are impacting us? We know that ESG, so environment, social responsibility, and governance, are really topics that have exploded recently. There's no reason to believe that they will not continue to be on the agenda. Now, what that means is that there's, first of all, a responsibility. Because we are responsible employers, we know that people seek today a bigger sense of purpose. So people want to know that they work for organizations that have a purpose and serve a purpose in society, and that's where ESG comes in. But it's also an accountability. We know that at least public companies will have to report more and more, as well as if you are a supplier, many of your customers, when you quote for work, they are asking you to show how you're doing on ESG. So this is a societal pressure from a positive point of view that is really there. We have very many positive workforce legislations around the countries as well, pledges in terms of increasing diversity, mainly focus on gender today, but you also play, of course, depending on the rules in the market and the legislation where you are. But there are other forces at play here as well, looking at wider diversity and wider inclusion. We also have a very growing middle class. The middle class has grown maybe around 100% the last 10 years. Now, what does that mean is that we have an expanded workforce. And we are all pretty aware probably what happens when we have a workforce that comes out, or a university force that comes out and are going to start work and there is no work provided. That creates chaos in societies. So we have a bigger responsibility to make sure that we can tap on that workforce. We also, with that growing middle class, think about the fact that that grows in number of customers and consumers for you and your businesses. Now, these customers or consumers are new. They're not necessarily the same ones that we have today. If we are not tapping on diversity and inclusion to try to understand the needs of those customers, we are losing out on a big portion of business. So these are a couple of the society pressures. Let's look at from an organizational point of view, and that's really where we play and we can have daily impact. First of all, it's really about setting your bold targets. And I don't talk about how high is high in terms of how many women you want to put in your management positions. That's a great target, and we need to strive for that. But it's really about being bold and thinking differently. How are you tapping onto the cognitive diversity so that you make sure you have people who think extremely differently than how you are thinking and your team are thinking, right? Irrespective of nationality and gender, but really that diversity of perspective that people can bring. From an organization perspective, what we can input very much is also around how we look at processes. So think around how can you, when you design your way of working, your policies, your processes, how can you make bias extremely difficult? And here technology, of course, comes in because it becomes much more objective when technology is helping us making selection for recruitment or talent, etc. So our aim is really to try to make bias very difficult. Today, if we're subjective, we know it's not difficult to be biased. We all have biases. I would also encourage all of us to really leverage what we have learned the past 2 years, right? So there was no chief COVID officer employed anywhere, yet within 36 hours, we all worked in new ways. Apart from frontline, of course, but office-based people who could actually work remotely. Let's leverage that. And how can you leverage this from a diversity and inclusion perspective? You can reach a much wider pool of talent if you are not thinking only and restricting yourself to the people that are based in your location and in your offices and need to come to the offices. So you can expand and reach a much more diverse target pool if you think differently to use remote. Find ambassadors who are really working outside the group. Expose yourself. Make sure people get exposed to differences. We normally fear what is different. But if we make sure that we expose ourselves to differences, and you can leverage this in your organizations by enhancing those dialogues, then that fear will eventually go away. Be prepared to take some heat. Now, when you start working on this and drive differences, not everybody will like it. You will get opinions, and you will get feedback and input, and maybe disappointment and reactions from the group that was primarily a majority, and now you're focusing on a minority group. But make a conscious decision that that's actually okay. And the last one, I would say, focus. Make sure you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, because then you will be able to have a complete alignment with your strategy in terms of how you're driving DE&I. The last lens is then the micro lens, and that's up to us. So it's all of you, it's me. What do we do to drive a bigger DE&I agenda and improve to make sure the picture looks better than it does today everywhere? First of all, I encourage us to define our personal inclusion legacy. What is it that we want to leave behind? What do you want to stand for in how you drive a much better and stronger inclusion than what you're currently doing? So we need to challenge ourselves and see what we can do. If all of us are doing this, we will have a huge focus on it, and we can create a lot of change if everybody's doing one single thing every day. Please speak up and react or redirect. When you see things that go wrong, this is also part of the legacy you can leave behind. I am reacting, I'm saying, because I'm here to support when I hear that this is not really very inclusive, right? We're excluding people the way we're acting or the way we're talking right now. Challenge yourself also to be uncomfortable. Right? It's a little bit, maybe even today during lunchtime or during the break, you can try to do something that you normally wouldn't do. Because the more we learn to be uncomfortable with things, the easier it is to understand differences. And we know that if we want to change something, we need to start with ourselves. I would also say we need to review and challenge our own support system. Like, how does it look in our home? How are we able to live the life we want to live? How can we have the career we need to have? And how can we really contribute at the best to our possibilities? It's something around our own support system at home as well, whether you're a man or a woman, but how do you make sure that everybody can flourish in the household? And the last one is about role modeling. Now, some of us have children. What kind of role models are we to make sure that a picture of this room in the metaverse looks like that sometime in the future? And if you don't have children, you are all in a workplace, and you are impacting people every day in that workplace. And when the young generation are entering the workforce, that's where we need to help them to make sure that differences is something to embrace. So I would say, think about what is your role? How are you putting your piece into the puzzle of making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a fundamental building block and will help your business flourish? Thank you very much.